Looking for all the latest tips, tricks, updates of what's going on in the recruiting industry, check out the Digital Recruiter Sunday night newsletter. I am not here to blow up your inbox. I don't have enough time to create an email every single day. I once a week send you impactful, a big thing that I've learned this week or realized from working with hundreds of recruiters, owning an agency myself. I'm in the trenches every day like you are, and I'm sharing everything that I'm seeing every Sunday, from content, from automation, from how to get better clients, how to find candidates quicker, how to grow your team, how to hire people, everything in between. The link is in the comments. Sign up today, or you can go to my LinkedIn profile, Clark Wilcox. It's the first link on my featured section. You can sign up there. It's all free. So you get all the tips, everything that you need, free in your inbox every Sunday night. Sign up today. It's catchy. I
Yeah,
like it.
it's funny. My background really isn't in recruiting.
Yeah.
It started off in, technology implementation, and I did kind of business process consulting. So I've kind of always had some hand in outsourcing most of my career. Started with software development, then it was kind of, outsourcing departments, and then it got into outsourcing creative design and marketing and all kinds of different things. So, and then it's really kind of evolved into a lot of recruiting.
Well, I pressed record. I wasn't going to include that, but it's such a good introduction that I'm going to officially introduce my guest today, Brian Hunt, the outsourcing guy, founder and CEO of Core BPO and Core RPO. Um, as you mentioned, background in consulting, and now works with agencies on helping build out their teams. A lot of that with outsourcing. So, Brian, appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Clark.
Awesome. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into the background. Like, what's the best place to start in terms of how you ended up here?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you're going to cut out the, the original intro
Yeah.
part, but yeah, no, I did a lot of outsourcing work in the early stages of my career. I
Yeah.
was with, Deloitte and Accenture, and I kind of always gravitated towards big, complex problems,
Yeah.
and so those always had a larger kind of software development piece to it. I was part of a project where we were designing, we were developing, Google spreadsheets before Google spreadsheets was a thing.
Yeah.
So if you can think about how technically challenging that was at the time, it was a kind of an internal project and whatnot. So yeah, I always had a hand in kind of working with teams offshore, South America, Central America, all over, Belize, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Argentina, Colombia, um, and then multiple teams in India, and then a lot of teams in the Philippines as well. So kind of had a wide range of experiences kind of leading up to getting in recruiting. And as we all do, we kind of end up in recruiting in various ways, various
Yeah.
storied ways. I'm sure you have your own story of how you ended up in recruiting, but yeah, I took over a staffing and recruiting company in 2010, and really 2009, 2010. And after about operating it for about a year, I thought to myself, a lot of this work can be done, with a team in India. And so, my passion has always been trying to blend what that means, because I believe recruiters, and especially good recruiters, will stand the test of time and will be around forever.
Yeah.
But how you can kind of empower them with the team offshore was kind of originally how I got into it.
That's yeah, it's a really interesting background, and we're going to dive in because that sentence alone, I'm sure, is going to trigger some recruiters on here what they can do my whole job. But to your point, right, there are certain skill sets that are really hard to replicate, and I don't think we'll ever be able to replicate, outside of kind of the human experience and kind of that rapport, that communication, and some of the nuance there. What are you know before we kind of get into core BPO and core RPO right now, like what are some of those differences and some of the things that you saw immediately, like, well, we can outsource this, like certain tasks or systems are a part of the operations. Like, what did that look like to you?
It's funny. I don't know how often recruiters really kind of analyze what they do. A lot of it comes instinctually to them, or instinctively, or however you would say it. And so they just know how to connect with people. They know how to they know how to reach out to a person. They know how to make them feel comfortable in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, they're conversationalists. And so it's funny, I approached some people early on, and I kind of went to some of my top recruiters and I said, "Hey, I'd like to, hire some people offshore to help you." And they kind of scratched their head and they said, "Well, I don't know if I can do that. Like, I have my way of doing things. I can't imagine doing this without really handling the process from end to end." And so it really became an exercise in consulting. Sat down with them and I broke down their desk with them. I said, "Tell me where you spend your time." It
Yeah.
was very much like I don't know if you ever saw Office Space,
Oh,
like
it sounds amazing. Yeah.
it was the Bobs. It was the Bobs. And
What would
what
you
do
say
you
you
do?
do?
What do you do?
Yeah.
So I asked my recruiting team that, and it was very non-threatening. Luckily, they knew more about recruiting than I did, even though I was running the company. And I said, "Look, I just want to know what you do, want to, and measure it for me." Like, and so they kind of broke it down, and they said, "Okay, this is how much time I'm on the job boards, and this is how much time I'm reaching out, and I call about this much at a time." And so then they started tracking it, so really, about 70% of the work, and I think this still remains true, is really kind of searching for candidates and reaching out to them. And so ultimately, I think some of the best recruiters, it's funny when I talk to clients now, like prospective clients, I always ask them, "What do you do for your best recruiters?" That's one of my favorite questions to ask because they're
Great
always like,
question.
well, I do a president's club, some
I
of them,
pay them. Yeah.
I pay them. I pay them
Yeah.
handsomely. I give them nice commissions and bonuses. So there's things like that. And and so I said, "Well, what do you do to help them?" And then they're like, "Oh, well, job boards, things like that." And I said, "Well, what if you were to take about 75% of the work off their plate that's low value, and they were to do 100% of the work that's the high value work?" And so that's really where it all started. I like working with talented recruiters. I
Yeah.
like working with, good people that could do more if they had help, you know. And I think a lot of people, it's funny, it's like, well, then if I have, and the way it worked is I'd have like a team of four, 3 or 4 recruiters. I had, points of contact, recruiters who were working with as many as 10 offshore recruiters. Um, and really you kind of change a little bit of what they do. But a lot of recruiters don't want to be managers, you know. I think that's a key.
That roadblock or that was like an obstacle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and I think a lot of people don't want to become managers, or I think they want to become managers until they become managers, and then they're like, "I'm not sure I should be doing this."
Yeah. That was me 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Alex Hormozy talks about that. He did a bit about, sales managers and your top sales guy. And he's like, never make your top sales guy your sales manager because he's probably not a good sales manager and you're going to lose your top sales guy. So you're going
Yeah.
to shoot yourself in the foot. So I think it's the same way with recruiters, like the best recruiters, they probably shouldn't be recruiting managers. And that's why you break down the process and you take away the sourcing, and that becomes one piece of the process, right?
Yeah.
And then really connecting with the candidate, diving deeper into their background, diving deeper into the client, the prospective jobs that you have for them, preparing them for the interview, pre-closing them, like all the really kind of juicy stuff that goes into making a recruiter really, really good. I always just wanted them to do more of that. And so, take all the sourcing and kind of the grunt work off their plate.
Well, I mean, you're speaking my language, which is part of the reason why we get along and connect and have a lot of things to talk about because it's the same thing on the LinkedIn side is, how to leverage some outreach, some systems, some content marketing. So they have more time with good, talented recruiters. I also love working with talented recruiters. I love the way that you said that because that is it. And just making their life easier because there's something magical about when you get a talented recruiter and the conversationalist and I I know it because I felt like I was pretty dang good at it when I started, and it was kind of the eureka moment of like, oh, I have a career I can do and be good at, and I resonate a lot with other recruiters that get it at that level. It's like I don't know how I got here, but this works, So how do I do more of that? And the data entry was always the easy thing to fall off. The sourcing was always a little tough, so it's just like man, I didn't know any of this stuff existed 10, 11 years ago at Aerotech, like automation, outsourcing VAs, outsourcing talent, that you could actually help and even supporting your top performers on the recruiting side. What is it about the reaction sometimes that's just like, there is a resistance to it, to like investing in your best people.
Oh, 100%. And not only is there a resistance at the highest level, but there's resistance with the best people, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And I think it's normal. I think it's normal for a couple of reasons. One, I think there's a lot of bad RPO recruiters out there. There's a lot of bad recruiting out there. Let's be honest.
Yeah. There is.
And I think that there's, um, the first concern that I get a lot is, well, this is my brand, and so they're going to be representing my company, assuming that you're, reaching out to them on my behalf. So there's concerns on that front. But yeah, like when I approached, my top recruiter in my company back in 2000, probably 2012, 2013, and she said no. She said she didn't want to do it. I actually went to the second best recruiter
Yeah.
in the company, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so I gave him a team of four offshore recruiters, and he took his GP, his gross profit, his margin, his spread, whatever you want to call it in your world, and he took it from $500,000 to 1.5 million. And so, and she was sitting at about 700,000, right?
Yeah.
With no offshore team. And so then she gets wind of the fact that he's now at 1.5. He's doubled his GP.
That was her. Yeah.
Right. And so I didn't have to convince her anymore. She came
Yeah.
to me. She's like, all right, I want my team.
And then
And
it's,
so then, and
yeah.
so then over the next, but she's like, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm like, I would hope for nothing else. Like,
Yeah.
don't do it my way, do it your way. And it's funny. We've learned so much with working with the team offshore and, on team. And she actually quadrupled her production. She
There you
did
go.
at
Yeah.
her peak, she was doing $2.4 million in gross profit. Yeah, and it's just she had a great ability to connect with candidates, and no, I just gave her an opportunity to connect with more of them.
The first lesson is when you want to try something new, go to your second best performer and say this can make you
Dude,
your first best performer because she didn't
right?
like being number two for very long.
No, she did.
Nothing will motivate top for better than when they're the second top performer. Yeah, and that's things change quick in our world, right? In both directions.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
that's so okay. So everyone listening is going to be like, okay, holy crap, quadrupled to doing
Hmm.
2.5 or whatever. Like, what? I mean, what did like how like what did it mean? Was she working more? She doing more? Like you
Nope.
mentioned, she didn't want to necessarily manage people, or people didn't want to manage. Like, how did that happen? Like, walk us through that. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the simplest way that I like to describe it is the relationship between setter and closer.
yeah,
So if you think about the sales world, right, you have these outbound callers, you have some kind of an inbound lead generation sometimes, and you're setting appointments. And um, when you're selling one thing, you're selling something consistently, it's easy to kind of set up that setter closer relationship. We actually have a few clients that do just that.
yeah,
And so, the ratios make sense. How many setters do you need to fill up the calendar of a closer? And then the closer's just on calls all day long,
yeah,
just doing what they do, closing deals. And the same thing goes for recruiting. It's obviously a little bit more nuanced. There's a lot more back and forth. There's a lot more, evaluation of where the search is going. You know, it's very much a job-centric search. So, I mean, a lot of recruiting companies either have a candidate-centric approach or a job-centric approach.
yeah,
It's very much a job-centric approach, and that's how you can really scale it. But and so the idea was if you have a team of four, sometimes five, and if they can find you 5 to 10 candidates a week on your jobs, and you have maybe instead of having 3 to 5 jobs on your plate, now you have, 15 to 20 jobs on your plate, and you've divvied those up amongst your team, all you're doing all day long is having real conversations with candidates. You're not digging through job boards. You're not, searching, crafting search strings and, doing all the old school things. You're really just spending most of your time talking to candidates.
And for clarification, because it can be split up so many different ways in our world, this was so the gross profit. They were recruiting only, and
It,
they were
mhm,
working on like contract to hire type roles for the
mhm.
most part. Maybe some direct hire.
No,
Okay.
actually,
Oh,
no. I would say 50-50 contract and direct.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and
Gotcha.
it's not exclusively on split desk recruiters only. Those two ones that I mentioned beforehand, but we had another, high volume full desk recruiter who he went from like $600,000 in GP to $1.3 million in GP. He was the one who had like a team of 8 to 10 at one point. So yeah, there's a lot of different applications for, to me, it's like every recruiting opportunity needs a different strategy.
Yeah.
Um, I think people get comfortable with what they know best, which is honestly the best route. My prediction in the future is the recruiters that have the most focused and dialed in niche are going to be the most successful because and that's been true for years. I mean, it's the age old question: do you specialize in one thing, or do you specialize in delivering good quality for your clients, and therefore they'll bring you all kinds of different jobs? um there's lots of ways to skin a cat, but I think there's going to be a premium for people who really know how to search on a job. And I've done so much recruiting on so many different types of jobs now that it's a puzzle. Every job search is a different
Yeah.
approach. Where are you going? What are you saying? How are you approaching it? And what's the marketplace? And so, yeah.
Well, I definitely want to talk about the managing piece at some point, but the fact that you said each search is its own thing, it's its own puzzle. A lot of people, when they look at getting outsourcing help, VA help, whatever you want to call it, automation, and or they think, oh, I can do more now. Like I can get more volume out there. Like it just can kind of be whatever, right? Like, oh, this role just needs a body. Go find me a bunch of people. Now, it's still like to your point. I found it not nearly as effective when you try to scale a transactional approach. But when you try to scale a consultative approach, that's where the gold is. It's kind of what I found, and just like, hey, we're using this to do quality work at a higher level, not just we can go spray and pray a bunch and just see what sticks.
Yeah, you have to have quality. And here's the math on quality. You have to talk to a lot of people
Yeah,
to find quality, because not only do you have to find the good people who sometimes aren't the easiest to find,
yeah,
right? We all know the ones that are desperate for a job and are applying probably aren't, the best candidates all the time. And of course, there's always exceptions, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it's a lot of work to find candidates. And so, I think that's the reality, and that's not changing anytime soon. Whether it's AI or help offshore,
yeah,
it's still difficult to find candidates, good
absolutely.
quality candidates.
The volume piece, yeah, you have to have intentional. What I have to say, the intentional volume is number one. People run one campaign or make three posts and be like, "Where are my results?" I'm like, "Well, I don't do this for another year, and let's talk." Right? Like, I mean, it's just you have to just keep going, keep going. Within there, you're going to get a ton, but like you got to just go. And a lot of people underestimate how much real volume they're doing and that they've done. Um, to kind of to your point. Uh, well, I want to break down because obviously you're the subject industry expert on this. Break down like because we didn't cover too much in the beginning. Like the core umbrella company, right? BPO, RPO. Like, what is it exactly that you guys are
Sure.
doing with agencies like right now? Like, how does that look in this day and age or in this day?
Yeah. So primarily for recruiting agencies, we provide recruiters that are working directly with them.
Yeah.
Okay, so uh, it's it's a we have dedicated staff, so we there's a relationship that's built. Um, uh, if you were to work with me, you would have one, two, three, sometimes four dedicated recruiters to your team. There's a team lead that would be assigned to that, so that there's some continuity, so that you're not trying to, educate and re-educate somebody. If somebody doesn't work out and you have to replace them, we have a team lead who can provide that continuity. They're also Our team leads are extremely senior and seasoned, and so they just know they instinctively know what every search is how it's gonna go. So that's the primary thing that we do for most of the clients that the agency world. But we do a lot of other things for them, a lot of marketing work, assistance, probably a lot of kind of basic, management of like LinkedIn, for example. A lot of folks don't want to manage their LinkedIn, so we do a lot of the management for them, especially if it's just kind of an owner operator or something, someone who has a consistent message or just wants to do some interaction. So yeah, but we do, we have developers, we have, a team of about 15, 20 marketing people. We've got some other kind of virtual assistant type works, internal admin type
Yeah.
work, anything that you really that it helps your agency run a little bit smoother, is essentially what we help our clients with.
Nice. And so, how do you like if I'm an agency, like how do you scope like a project like that, right? If I get 5 people, 15, 20 people, like what's the starting point, right? Because I talk to owners a lot, and even my business growing a little bit, like how in terms of people, like it's just sometimes it's like how do I even process bringing someone on and how they're gonna come into the workflow, right, and actually be effective. Like how do you start
Yeah,
mapping that out with someone? Yeah.
it's there's three main, I guess, pain points
Yeah.
that kind of start the process. So my clients either have an influx of jobs,
Yeah.
um, or they have an unpredictably fluctuating level of jobs. So, um, picture picking up a project where there's going to be, a lot of recruiting kind of upfront. So there's periodic shifts. Um, there might be attrition. You may have lost some good recruiters, and so you're kind of reluctant to replace them. And so why not, find some help to make your best recruiters better? Um, and then there's kind of nuanced pockets of demand, so this is like, hey, we have a VMS or an MSP, and we need to dedicate 2 to 3 recruiters to kind of support that
Yeah.
initiative. Or we just hired some salespeople and they're fairly new and we want to support them, but our recruiting team is still working on deals that are closing with paying clients. And so we want to have like a sales support recruiting team. It's just, out finding, you know, most placeable candidates and, skill marketing type of opportunity candidates.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what are some of like the mistakes that when people start talking to you, they've maybe tried this before, or tried outsourcing? Like, what are some of those
Yeah.
common mistakes that you see people make?
Yeah. This is my favorite topic
All right, let's go.
because yeah, it's funny. I talked to so many people who have tried this,
Yeah.
and I think there's a 50-50 split between the who's responsible for it failing, right?
Yeah.
Because I always like to say that, there's the old, there's the old historical kind of, Cortez when he landed in the New World, and he, was there to stay. And so he burned the ships,
Yeah.
right? So failure wasn't an option. You're burning the ships. So you have to kind of go in with this has to succeed. Like we're not experimenting with this. We're making this work. So that's kind of like the first thing. You have to
Yep.
go in with like a mentality of we are making this work. And it is a we. Um, on the recruiting on the RPO side, on the on the outsource recruiting side, I've seen because I've worked with several RPO providers before we built our own. And um, they play a lot of bait and switch. You get one person one day, and then they sound different the next day, and you could tell they were kind of doing a collaborative, and there was a little bit of loss in translation. So on the RPO side, they do some of that, which is never good. Um, I also think they introduce recruiters who don't have enough experience. They don't train them enough. They don't groom them enough. They don't give them enough of a learning curve to kind of get up to speed. Um, and I think some of the recruiting, the RPO companies don't do a good enough job of really onboarding and kind of controlling the process. They're like, okay, here we are, do
Yeah.
what you tell us to do. So that's where the failures happen on the RPO side. On the point of contact side, there's a little bit more, right? So I'm a firm believer that they have to have access to the ATS, and some clients have been reluctant for various reasons to give access to the ATS, and I think that's kind of a disservice to the whole process. We have to be able to not only look at some of the candidates that you've talked to, but also be able to load them in and put the notes in. I'm a firm believer that we have to be a representative of your brand.
Hmm.
So whatever your company name is, we have email addresses, and we have LinkedIn profiles that are set up to be exactly like the way they are, the way they would appear for their internal employees. And there has to be an ironing out of the process. Like the process is really important. What questions are we asking? So this is a big part of our onboarding process. We ask them to really define at the highest level, like if we're talking about all candidates, all recruiting. What are we asking? What are the questions that we asking? And then not only that, what's the handoff look like? And when we hand them off, what are the questions that your team is going to ask on top of the questions that we've asked? So it's fairly basic. It's not rocket science, but it's really kind of working through, how that flows and how that looks. A lot of our clients have a hard time changing. So if they hire us and they go do the exact same things, that's not really going to work all that well. A lot of our clients or some of our clients have made the mistakes of bringing in jobs, and they'll recruit the jobs for a couple days,
Yeah.
and then they'll hand them off to their offshore team. It's like that's not going to work. Like if you've worked it for a couple days and you haven't been successful, then what's going to make them successful to work it a little bit more. So yeah, it's rec allocation, or job allocation, job assignment is a key one. And then really, yeah, defining the process. And again, every recruiting, I'm so surprised at how different all recruiting companies are, and even how they engage with their RPO providers and their partners. But it's really about ironing out the process. Like we're, you know, we're. I always say we're manufacturing candidates, right? We're in the business of manufacturing candidates, just like Henry Ford was manufacturing the Model T.
Yeah.
And so, you know, how many do we need to create a potential candidate or a potential submittal? And what are we asking? What is our client asking? And really ironing out exactly how the whole thing flows.
To your point, like it's not rocket science. I think the science of recruiting, you figure it out pretty quickly. But the art of recruiting, everyone draws differently. And like that's to your point, it's all different. And it's interesting. I mean, you've been running core longer than I've been running digital recruiter, but working with a similar market, the same market really all the time. I've noticed that you have to have your system and I think approach. Like you have to have that down. But that and it's a common number. Like, oh, yours is like people are like, oh, you're not one size fits all. I'm like, no, but I work. My process is to get to know you. because then I can show you how to think through this and how to make this system and approach work for you. But you do there's a learning curve there that I found just the first
Yeah.
3 years, and just people had success early on and all that, but there's different types of recruiters. I think it's been one of the hardest parts for me to nail down. It's like, okay, not everyone's different, but like I know this is the approach that works. I think what I'm hearing is like the burn the ships is a really good way. Like it's such an important mindset. You can't dip your toes into digital transformation or people transformation. It's either all in or just wait. I tell people like either be all in or just wait. It's all good
Yeah.
either way, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the key. And it's funny. I have my recommendations, just like you have your
yeah,
recommendations. You go to your clients and you say, "Hey, this is what I would suggest." But if you've done consulting for as long as I have, and sure you have, you learn quickly that as much as you have ideas on the way you should do it, it's ultimately their decision on how
yeah,
they want to do it and how they should do it. So it's funny. I've had clients who deviate. I had a client that was ready to sign, and they wanted to start, and they're like, "Yeah, but we're not going to give you access to our ATS." I'm like, we're going to be tripping over the same candidates. There's going to be, candidate ownership issues. Uh, you know, we're just going to be working with 50% less information. It was an established company. They had plenty of candidates. And it was just one of those things where I just didn't feel like it was going to be, a successful partnership. And it was just a lot of other things that there was kind of like, is this the right client for us? Is this going to be successful? And so I didn't do it. And then I had another client who came to me and said, "I want you to do end-to-end screening. I don't want you to just ask some handful of screening questions, the basic ones. I want you to really, ask the full suite of questions and then submit them to the client." And so I said, "You know what? Okay." And it's funny for that particular one. I said, "You're going to have to be a little patient though, because you're asking our recruiters to do just as much as your recruiting team. In fact, the same amount. So you're going to compare your team, who has experience, training, has been doing this a long time, with my team. And if you try to compare apples to apples, it's not going to work, and at least not in the first 6 months." So I said, "Just give us 6 months at least to really do something that's completely end to end and compare with your team." And now there's a comparison,
yeah.
right? So now the team is they've got a solid team of five. They started with some more, and they had some turnover, and finding really the best recruiters for them was key. And now they love their team, and I'd put them on par with their internal team, but that takes time.
Absolutely. What are in hearing that I'm interested in like the industries that you're seeing be successful. I mean, you can list some off. You can talk about ones that might surprise people that have been successful with this model. Like, I'm interested. I see a smile on your face. So I know you love this question. Yeah,
I
I'm
did
with.
too, because
Yeah,
it's funny because everybody has this. You actually you didn't. It was subtle, but you said probably a lot of like contract positions.
yeah.
I get I so
Well,
I
oh,
get
it's
the
only because I
con.
heard gross profit.
Yeah, right.
That's
Yep.
my
Mhm.
aerotech brain went to staffing when
Yeah,
I hear
right. Yeah.
GP. But I was like, it could also be direct hire as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
we would bundle it up. Even those numbers I was sharing before, the 2.3, half of that was contract, half
yeah,
of that was direct. Um, but I think what I found is that if you have regardless of what your approach is, you have to have the right, kind of group, and you have to groom them up. And
yeah.
so, like, specifically to your question about, you know, areas where they can be successful. A lot of it has to do with, are you successful with what you're doing today?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's the question number one. Like, and if so, how successful are you? What are you really good at? In terms of industries, I mean, I've seen this be successful in industries that I didn't think. right? We have a client in the Netherlands that does like biotech placements, and some of them are like Dutch speaking required. And I'm like, ooh, that's kind of outside of our skill sets, because there's obviously no Dutch speaking folks with our team in India, but they managed to find candidates a lot. Everyone kind of speaks, most they have to have English as part of the job requirement, even
Yeah.
though it's a Dutch speaking company. They also have to have English speaking, and that's become such a common place, skill to have, that we were able to find Dutch speaking life sciences folks in the Netherlands. Construction, surprise, that was another one that like, yeah, like, so roofing contractors, okay, so, and we're not going to be so these roofing contractors, they're probably on roofs all day, like, how do you get a hold of them? But if you have an approach of how you get a hold of them, we can mirror that approach. I
Yeah.
mean, that's really the way it works. We've had oil and gas clients. Obviously some of the ones that are pretty normal and natural are, IT and some of the office and professional positions. But I've been surprised. We've done executive search too. We've done kind of outbound executive, kind of on behalf of placement.
Yeah.
That works well.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I'm so and so. I'm calling on behalf of Clark Wilcox. He pointed you out in particular as somebody he wanted to speak with. Do you have time next week to set some time aside for him? So it works in whatever way works with you, and kind of allowing us to kind of take a piece of it.
Yeah, the transfer of trust, right? There's so many different ways
Mhm.
to yeah, to really do it. It's interesting, those industries. I'm almost found it easier at times in the ones that aren't as tapped into, the saturated. If you, to your point, if you figure out the approach, and the mirroring is a great way to put it, because that's all this is. Any automation, any content, or any help that you get, it's going to mirror what is already working. And so when people,
Yeah.
look at the wins that I post about, they're like, well, "What made that person?" I'm like, "Well, that person's been doing this for 20 years. They just never leveraged anything of what they did well." Do you have 20 years of success doing this that you've never leveraged? No. So it might look different to you. And now I have new recruiters that get wins right away, and like, but they bring, maybe there's something to bring to the table. To your point, I love that you said like you have to leverage your strengths, and like if you don't have any, you might need to go. Why do you don't need to outsource anything. You need to actually get good at this first, right? That's probably why you've leaned into the I work with talented recruiters. It's like you got to bring something to the table.
Yeah. 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 It's funny. In the early days, I mean, these recruiters who are they're just pounding phones.
Yeah,
There's like next resume, email out, call, call. So what they lack in finesse and connecting with the client or candidate, they make up for on volume.
hmm
You've seen that before, the volume recruiter. It's funny. Those are ones that you're gonna have to like change it a little bit and say, okay, let's slow it down. Like, what are you gonna if we're gonna do a lot of the outbound, if we're gonna do a lot of the connecting to those candidates, what are you gonna how are you gonna take that forward? What are you gonna say to that candidate that's gonna get them really excited? And we have seen an improvement with some of those kind of volume recruiters on their ability to close more of the candidates that they're submitting. Right. So if you're like, think about it, this, like you're working your own desk, you've got 5, 6 jobs, whatever. You're like, oh, I need candidates. I need candidates. This is a recruiter's mentality. I need more candidates. I need more candidates. And so if you take that off their plate, then you can be like, okay, well, no, I just need to connect with the candidates that I have. Right.
yeah,
That way they feel like I'm an advocate for them, or I'm an advisor for them. And, I can provide more value than just, hey, I got a job for you and I called you out of the blue.
yeah.
So,
How that transformation could be a little tough for people to make. Like, what are there? How long does it take for someone to kind of make that switch or adjust, or is there any recommendations, or is it kind of just you get who
you
you
know,
get? But like, yeah,
what's funny? I would do this operationally with my team internally. And I was like, see Jenny, and She was one of our top recruiters, but her average call length is 15 minutes. Yours is 4. What do you think Jenny's getting that you're not, right? It's just the math of it. Your average call length is only 4 minutes, even your longest ones. Because I looked through call logs and I just kind of, again, this is in my breakdown of work and how everything's going. But when I think it's not as hard as it's not as hard as it sounds.
Just
It's
gotta track
like,
it.
yeah, you just got to track it, and you got to be like, okay, these are the things that you need to get out of this call. Like, have them share a lot more about their background. Ask them open-ended questions about their background. Find 3 or 4 things that you think are unique that you can sell to a client, right? Like that's that's value in and of itself. I mean, half the time, you get a recruiter's like, yeah, I got a job, right? And then they find a candidate and they're like, yes, this candidate's qualified for this job. They have all the requisites, but they may not have really dug in to say, what did you do to add value at your previous,
Yeah.
jobs that I can really, you know, tout to my hiring manager and say you really need to work with this candidate. So
A lot of when I work with people always comes down to a drop in the fundamentals is typically where there's been a drop. And I'm hearing that you basically have systemized the fundamentals to this. And so there's really not a gap there. And it's just like if you do that, once you do that, you most people have no idea what that even looks like. Once you do that, you don't even know what new world awaits for you if you just like clean that up and get that going. So it's not necessarily even adding more people, it's just like fixing that piece of it. Then you can actually measure things accurately.
yeah, I mean, to use a sports analogy, right? Let's take football, right? There's 11 positions on either side of the ball. You got one guy throwing it, one guy catching it, a lot of guys blocking it. You got one guy running with it. You got, various people tackling and doing coverage and all that kind of stuff. It's a lot, right? So I always think that in a lot of ways, we've asked recruiters to do, a lot for their job. They're cleaning resumes up to send over to candidates. They're helping, I mean, to clients. They're helping clients clean up their job descriptions to make sure they're good. They're posting those job descriptions online. They're fielding candidates that may have applied. They're calling outbound to candidates that are potential prospects. They're searching across multiple job boards and learning the nuances of all these different job boards and all these different sources of information, and then throw in all of the AI complexities that are being added to it. We can't, like, recruiting's kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of different challenging things,
Yeah.
and I always like to say, look, if you really just want to connect with candidates and provide a good solid connection and value to your candidates, then that's great.
Yeah. The sometimes like I think building like trust or how do people when you outsource you have offshore teams like fitting into the culture the team dynamic like how does that process like look right integrating with teams different time zones all that stuff like
Yeah.
what some kind of best practices and maybe things to kind of stay away from in considering all that.
Yeah, this is a fun one too, because every country is really, really different. It
Yeah.
it really is. I mean, everything from, you know, forget about culture. There's laws that are different in all these
Mhm.
countries. The time off is different, the vacation time is different. So you really, if you're going to go with an RPO partner, you really need to know kind of what you're getting into. I always tell people this is kind of a marriage. So you gotta do your homework and figure out, what's the right thing to do. But um, and there's different nuances with each country. I found working with the people in the Dominican Republic, they were a lot more kind of aggressive on sales than the folks that I was working with in Belize. And the people in Costa Rica, I think were a little bit, a little bit challenging at times in certain areas of productivity, but they were really, really great in terms of creative and kind of design. I work with some great designers in South America too. So there's some nuances in culture that I think are key. Um, I think a lot of people within nursing have there's a lot of Filipina nurses in the U.S. So I think kind of doing recruiting on nursing is a natural fit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Indians in IT, so having Indians recruit on IT is a easy fit. Most of my recruiters in India also have like either a background in education or at least a handful of connections and people that they know that work in IT. So
Yeah.
the language of IT comes easy to them,
Yeah.
right? Whereas I've seen the language of IT coming a little slower to some of the folks in other areas like the Philippines and South America, because they just haven't been exposed to it. So, couple that with all the kind of, typical cultural country nuances, family life, commute times, working at night, not working at night. Our teams always work within the time zone of our clients. So we have folks on EST, CST, PST, and then London and EU time, and then an Asian shift as well. So that's an easy one for us. We've kind of mandated that as part of our process, but it's an important thing to consider. It's funny. I just talked to a client last week who is mostly going to sign up. He has an RPO partner, but they only work overnight, and they source resumes and pass resumes over, but they don't you know they don't work it during the day. And he's gotten to the point now where he thinks it's a big gap,
Yeah.
and so he's looking for us to help him with that piece of it.
Yeah, especially when you need that live real time back and forth.
Yeah,
It's huge, right? It's a
yeah.
huge that would cause a gap. What I mean, there's we haven't really talked about AI, and I won't ask necessarily like the generic AI questions that I'm sure you get asked all the time. But it's like, what over the last half of this decade, blending what you know about offshoring, nearshoring, recruiting agencies with like emerging technologies, with all the rapid evolution of AI. Like, what are you looking out for? What do you think kind of might be happening? What are you paying attention to? Where do you think like the areas of like innovation are? That people might not be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I had somebody say to me that AI was going to replace RPO, and this is a few years ago, 2 years ago, and in some ways, I think it will. It'll like anything, something new always changes something. Um, I mean, heck, it seems like every 5, 10 years, there's a new job board within our industry that's, kind of emerges as
Yeah,
if you've been in the industry as long as I have, you've seen the evolution of, the career builders monsters, the
yeah,
dice, the ladders, in
mm,
LinkedIn, Indeed, I
yeah,
mean, you can do a history of all of them, and there's all kinds of different, niche job boards that are out there. But so I think that there's a lot of technology changes that just naturally happen, and but the fundamentals never really change, right? And so it's funny. We're using a lot of AI. I think it's actually kind of an equalizer for us because it helps us to craft messages easier. Helps us to, we used to have you know, to spend a lot of time on the details of like emails and cleaning up resumes, and that was a challenge for some of our offshore recruiters. English isn't their first language. And so there were some gaps and some misses that we've had in the past. And that's why we had a point of contact or a main recruiter who would kind of catch a lot of those things.
yeah,
Some of them were better at proofreading than others. But I think AI is really going to help kind of level the playing field on that. And then in terms of automation, it's funny, I've talked to. virtually, well, I shouldn't say that because there's probably some AI companies that are emerging, some that I haven't talked to, but I've talked to a lot of AI recruiting companies. Um, I think the AI has the biggest application for AI in our space is if you know exactly who you're going after, exactly what you're saying, exactly what you're doing. I think it's actually more of a game changer for hiring managers and internal recruiting departments than it is for agencies, because agencies are constantly adapting to different jobs, the job of the
Yeah.
day. They're constantly changing their priorities. Um, so I think it'll affect our industry. I think it's already has. The one area that I would say is the high volume um, hiring, companies. I think of like, warehouse, workers for like Amazon. Like if that's not, hasn't been developed in some kind of an AI workflow, then great. What we're doing for our clients is we're using kind of basic automation tools. You can call them AI, you can call them automation, but things like N8N. I
Yeah.
don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of N8N, but N8N is interesting because you have to have kind of both sides of N8N, handled. Do you have the N8N that can, use automation to find more jobs and more hiring managers, and then do you have the automation to find more candidates? And so, those are the things that we're, kind of working with our clients on is, I always like to say a lot of recruiting companies are always hiring for XYZ, or if you bring me this kind of a candidate, we have clients that will always hire that kind of a candidate.
Yep. That's the best NPCs, right? Is
Yeah.
is is exactly that. Um, no, it's super cool, man. I learned a lot. I think you validate a lot of things that I've seen with my own eyes, which is cool, and just to kind of hear the different perspective, giving me something to think about, especially if I want to really scale an agency at some point. If I get the itch again, I'm definitely know who I'm calling. The any like last thoughts, words of wisdom, anything before we wrap up here that you have for the listeners?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I'd love for you to get
Yeah.
back into recruiting full time. Give me a call. We'll get your team rolling. Um, but I do think that, like, it's funny. I have two clients that have recently departed their company. I think, you know, times like the last 2 years do a lot to shake up our industry. You get small recruiting companies that get acquired by bigger recruiting companies.
Yeah.
You get companies that either go out of business or they become fragmented. You get some natural layoffs that happen within smaller recruiting companies, even some bigger recruiting companies. So there's more independent recruiting talent that's out there. I actually really enjoy. I'm actually working with two kind of entrepreneurs right now that are kind of solopreneurs, helping them build out their team. I think it's a great way to start. Like if you are a good recruiter slash account manager, you've worked with clients, you have, jobs you're working on. It's hard to hire that second person. You got to feed yourself
Very
first.
hard. Yeah.
Then you got to hire that second person. It's a lot easier to feed yourself first and then, work with us to get you more help until you really can afford another person.
It's definitely a worthwhile conversation whether you got one person all the way up to however many people, right? I mean, I guess even large firms, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
they you're someone they should be having a conversation with, and even if you're scoping things out and trying to map out and get the puzzle pieces going. I mean, that's why there's experts like yourself around. Like they've been through it and kind of help strategically. And to your earlier point, everyone does have their own unique situation. So it's like it's good to just start those discoveries, start inquiring, have someone like you just help map out like potential routes someone could go. You might have to make a decision right then and there, but thinking through like, oh, okay, those are our strengths. This could be our go-to-market approach with something
Yeah.
like this. Like, let's get it going. And I think there are so many cool solutions, and it's always nice to hear when it's like people-oriented solutions because I think there's such a need for high level execution, not just AI. tool wrappers and all that are sold at an overpriced markup, but actual people getting work
Mhm.
done. To me, execution's the name of the game right now.
Oh yeah.
With all the tools and the tech. So, dude, Brian, appreciate you being on, sharing your knowledge, your background.
Appreciate you having me.
It's been super cool. So I've learned a ton. I know the listeners have as well. So if you're it's great having you. And so if you're we have the LinkedIn URL, what's the best way to connect? LinkedIn URL, website, should we book a call with you? What's
Yeah,
the next
core
step?
it,
Yeah.
yeah, core RPO, it was the K, or core BPO. Yeah, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn, Brian Hunt, I'm on LinkedIn. And then yeah, Brian at core RPO, KORE, RPO.com.
I love it. Well, all that contact info in there. Brian, thanks again, man. And until next time, happy hunting.